Want proof of God's sovereignty? Justin Trudeau. Not because Trudeau's a righteous man, he's certainly not, but because no one could endure such political turmoil on their own over the last how many years like Trudeau has and yet remain in power. For some reason, and I don't know what it is, God has Trudeau in office. It's the only explanation for why he's still there. Let's hear question period today.
The common sense Conservatives have a plan to cut taxes, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime. However, the costly Prime Minister, with the support of the Bloc Québécois, is inflating inflation with taxes and deficits and the Prime Minister wants even greater tax hikes on the 1st of April. Will the Prime Minister inverse his inflationary policies, or are we going to have to defeat him with a no-confidence vote and an election on taxes?
It's absolutely correct for Poilievre to hammer the carbon tax in particular. That carbon tax is so evil. It's so egregious. It's so unjust. It has to be day after day after day exposed for what it is.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The carbon remittance puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 families under federal jurisdiction. We give more families to families whilst fighting against climate change, Mr. Speaker. That's what the vast majority of Canadians want. Unfortunately, however, the conservative politicians don't want to help affordability. They don't want to help fighting climate change. Luckily, the majority in this House wants to fight against climate change and give more money to Canadians, and that is what we are trying to do. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. That's quite the opposite compared to what the Parliamentary Budget Officer said on the 18th of March. He said, when we consider the economic impacts of the carbon tax, most families will pay more and be negatively impacted by the carbon tax. So what the Prime Minister said is simply not true. Canadians will pay more than what they receive. And there's a second carbon tax that is directly applicable on the backs of Quebecers. So will the Bloc Québécois vote for Quebec families, or will they vote again for their real boss, the Prime Minister of the Federal Government of Canada?
So Poilievre is using the carbon tax as a sort of litmus test. And he is framing it in a way of, if MPs vote against the carbon tax, then they're standing with their constituents. If the opposite is true, if MPs vote in favor of a carbon tax, if they vote with the Liberals on issues and so on, then they are instead exercising allegiance, not to their constituents, but to the party in power. And I think it's a good strategy.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, if the Leader of the Opposition stopped talking and started listening to Canadians, he would understand that Canadians know that the costs of inaction with regards to climate change are huge. Forest fires, floodings, droughts that cost a lot to our farmers and producers, our fishers. This is a reality, and we are fighting against this on this side of the House, whilst putting more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 families throughout the country.
So if we listen to the Liberal nonsense, the Liberal garbage, we would believe in our minds the idea that nothing is ever bad or nothing has ever happened that's bad or undesirable with weather ever until our generation or a few generations ago. For the whole of history, the weather was quote unquote normal, whatever that means. There were no floods. There were no droughts. There were no fires. None of those things. No. All of these issues we're now facing, cold weather, hot weather, normal weather, rain, sunshine, too little rain, too much sunshine, snow, mud, and so on, are a consequence of us harvesting oil and gas. Now, of course, the problem with Trudeau's argument is that there are history books, there are scriptures. The 7 years of plenty occurred in the land of Egypt, came to an end. This is in Genesis. And the 7 years of famine, would you look at that? Famine, drought, no food began. There was a famine in all the lands. But of course, there was bread in Egypt because Joseph had saved it up. At any rate, famine, drought, it happens also with Elijah, King Ahab. It happens time and time again in history. Now, far from oil and gas being the problem The contrary is true. It's because of oil and gas that we can survive droughts. We can survive years without rain. We can survive years with too much rain. Farmers, using technology that has been granted to them by oil and gas, are able to harvest crops even in harsh and otherwise inhospitable weather. It's a miracle that we don't go hungry if we don't get enough rain one year. It's an absolute miracle, where for the whole of history, that would have been a death sentence for a population, or for a vast majority of them, except, of course, the rich in government. Now it's not a concern. Not in the same way it was. Because we have technology, again, thanks to, in large part, oil and gas, that allows us to operate in such conditions.
The carbon remittance delivers for Canadian families, and the Conservative Party wants to take it away from Canadian families.
While common sense conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, with the parliamentary budget officer testifying again that the majority of households will see a negative impact as a result of the carbon tax. End quote. Now he wants to hike the tax on April Fool's Day. We won't stand for it. So what will it be with this Prime Minister? Will he spike the hike, or will he face a non-confidence vote at a carbon tax election?
All right, so Poilievre wants an election. He wants one badly.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report lays out clearly that 8 out of 10 Canadian families across the country where the price on pollution applies get more money back every year. That's how we put more money in the pockets of Canadians while having one of the strongest plans to fight climate change around the world. That's what the Conservative Party is standing against right now. Money in the pockets of Canadian families and a real plan to fight climate change that is working, Mr. Speaker, that is bringing down emissions, that is making us more competitive, that is helping build the future.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I'm going to read again the testimony from the March 18th appearance of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Once you factor in the rebate, but also the economic impacts, the majority of households will see a negative impact as a result of the carbon tax. End quote. The Prime Minister plans to make this problem worse with a carbon tax hike on heat, on homes, on fuel, on food. We will not stand for it. So once again, which will it be? Will he spike the hike, or will we have a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
What will it be, Mr. Speaker? It will be that Canadians get more money with the Canada Carbon Rebate. 80% of Canadian households in areas where the federal carbon tax applies get more money every year from the Canada Carbon Rebate than they pay in the price on pollution. On top of that, we are fighting climate change, making our industries more competitive, and preparing a better future. There is no plan on the Conservative side of the House to either help Canadians with rebate checks or fight climate change.
The Honourable
Right, so it's the strangest thing, because government tells me that first they can take money from us, from all of us, and then they give more of it back to us. How is that possible? It's a magic trick. Wow. Take from the left, give from the right, take a lot from the left, and then give more back from the right. What would be best? Of course, the Liberals talk time and time again about the rebate, the rebate, the rebate, the rebate. They love to talk about the rebate. And the question to ask them is simple. How much are we paying in carbon tax? First, where does the money for that rebate come from? It certainly doesn't come from Trudeau's pockets. And second, what about the tax? They conveniently leave out the fact that if we eliminated the rebate, if the Conservatives eliminated the rebate, they would also be eliminating the tax.
Leader of the Opposition.
Not only did the Parliamentary Budget Officer testify that the majority of households will pay more in carbon taxes than they will get back in rebates. There is a table showing that every single province states in which this tax applies, the middle-class families pay vastly more than they get back, and Canadians know it, because under this Prime Minister, they've seen their food, their fuel, their homes, their heating go through the roof. But why don't we just end the debate and let Canadians decide and have a carbon tax election?
So obviously, Poilievre smells the momentum right now, and who couldn't? It's clear and present. The Liberals are in serious distress. They're in danger, insofar as no one likes them right now, and for good reason. Their corruption is manifest, their disdain for Canadians is clear, and their arrogant presence of privilege is insufferable. We're tired of it.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer clearly spelled out that 8 out of 10 Canadian families in areas where the price on pollution applies get more money back every year than they pay in the price on pollution. That's because we created a plan that not only is one of the strongest plans to fight climate change in the world, but it puts more money back in the pockets of middle-class Canadians as we build a stronger future, better careers, more competitiveness, and a safer environment for generations to come. That's the plan we have. That's not what they're doing.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
The honourable.
So, what has Trudeau told us? He doesn't want to call an election. This squabble about the parliamentary budget officer clearly was won by Poilievre. Poilievre actually pulled out the report and read it verbatim. Trudeau did not, preferring instead to retire to his bored and tired talking point of 8 out of 10 Canadians are richer. 8 out of 10 Canadians are richer. Is that really the case? Is that really the truth? Do all of us feel like we get more from our carbon rebate than what we pay into the carbon tax? Is that the idea? Is that what Trudeau is trying to make us believe? Really? Really? It doesn't excuse, not only do I not believe that, but it doesn't excuse the premise of putting a price on carbon. That's nonsense. That's absolute and utter nonsense. We should not be punished for using oil and gas. We shouldn't be punished because we're using a source of energy which is reliable, cheap, brilliantly effective, miraculous, abundant, and so on, so we can survive. Why are we being punished for that? Why is it that government demands we move away from that system? Well, the answer is clear. Oil and gas gives us freedom. Oil and gas supplies us with an abundance of freedom. Driving, heating our homes, food security with farmers, and so on. All of those things provide us freedom. And of course, this government, the Liberal government, the NDP party, hate it.